It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's talk about the money that is now not going to be in Jayson Tatum's pocket, and it's going to be more of it in the owner's pocket, which, you know what? I'm not so much a fan of that. Like, the owners split this with the players. Owners get their cut. The fact that the ownership is going to save money off of this, I don't like the fact that they're being as frugal as they are right now, but here we are. So how much money do they actually save? Now, Tatum gets 25% of the cap as a max extension. So instead of paying him 30% of the cap, they pay him 25% of the cap, which saves them about $5.6 million in the short term and about $32.6 million in the long term. I've already talked about that. But let's talk about this season, because this season was we're watching what the Celtics are going to do, how they're going to trade Kemba, and what are they going to do with Evan Fournier. And $5.6 million doesn't give them $5.6 million to spend. It doesn't save them anything as far as cap goes. But tax-wise, the $5.6 million could actually be more than $5.6 million, because what happens is the luxury tax is in tiers. And so if the Celtics, depending on how they spend their money, this could save them up to 16 plus million or more, depending on how they spend their money. I apologize if this is tax talk here. I'm going to make it simple as possible. The first basically $5 million you're over the tax line, you're taxed at $1.50 per dollar that you're spending. So if you're $5 million over the tax, you're paying $7.5 million in additional taxes, right? So that's $7.5 million on top of whatever your payroll is. If you're $10 million over the cap, you now have that $7.5 million plus another $8.75 million. So now you're up over $16.25 million. If you're $15 million over the cap, you add $12.5 million to that. So what's that? 16.25? So 28.75. And then if you're another $5 million over the cap, you add 16.25 to that. So you get what I'm talking about. There's like I lost track, over $40 million in taxes. So if the Celtics end up $15 million over the cap, they pay an additional $12.5 million in taxes. Had Jayson Tatum made the All-NBA team, that saves them they would have had to pay him not just $5.6 million more, they would have to add to that the $16.25 million, right? So they actually, depending if they end up $15 million over the cap, what they end up saving is $21.85 million. That's how much money they actually save, real dollars that they didn't pay out that they could have. Now, if they end up not paying the tax, if they end up like 1 cent under the tax line, then what they save is the $5.6 million plus the $7.5 million they would have paid in taxes. You get it? So instead of $5.6 million, the real number is $13.1 million. So the range of money that they save because of this varies based on what signings they do. And look, this could be the difference between them staying under the luxury tax for one more season versus paying the tax this season, which pushes off the repeater tax. The repeater tax, for those of you who don't know, and this is why Daniel Tice was traded last season. Again, I'm sorry if the people don't want to hear about taxes, but this is how this team is shaped. They traded away Daniel Tice, Javonte Green, and gave away picks to make that happen because they didn't want to pay the repeater tax sooner, right? So if you pay if you pay a tax in 3 of 4 years, 3 of the previous 4 seasons, then you become a repeater. So because the Celtics paid a tax a couple years ago, and if they would have paid the tax this past season, it would have triggered the repeater tax in like a couple years. By not paying that tax, they pushed it off by a couple more years. The repeater tax, you add $1 to all the tax rates. So instead of in the first $5 million paying a $1.50 rate, you pay a $2.50 rate. And then in the next one, you're paying $2.75 instead of $1.75, and so on and so on and so on. So the $5 million in the repeater tax is $12.5 million instead of $7.5 million. And then the next $5 million you're adding $13.75 million instead of $8.75 million. And it goes on and on and on and on. This was added to break up super teams. This was added to make sure that the teams that could, in the past, pay everybody and accumulate stars, and this is why the hard cap exists. You say, why can't you get somebody in a sign and trade? Sign and trade, accepting someone in a sign and trade, not sending them out, accepting someone in a signing trade triggers the hard cap. Why is the hard cap there? And why is the repeater tax there? And why is the tax rate so high? All of it is geared towards preventing super teams from existing or keeping them from existing too long, right? That you don't just have, if the Celtics had Tatum and Brown, and let's say they find somebody else, okay? Let's say they get Bradley Beal. This system is designed to break up that team in 5 years. So this is why there's so much pressure and why players have so much power and why teams are trying to do everything that they can to appease their young stars. Getting somebody who's as good as they can, as superstar level on a rookie contract, so huge. Like hitting on a draft pick becomes so much more valuable because that player's on a rookie contract and you're saving that money until they actually hit this max. Now you're paying Jayson Tatum $28 million in change. You're paying Jaylen Brown $24 million change. If you trade for Bradley Beal, he's going to be making in that range, like the $30 million range. And now his contract is up. You got to pay. You're trading for him. You're of course going to extend him. And then you get to a point where those guys start making a whole lot of money and you're paying the tax to build around those teams, and you pay the tax for 4 years. Well, guess what? Now you're in repeater territory. So now your team that costs $140, $150 million ends up becoming like the Golden State Warriors, where all of a sudden becomes a $225 million team. And then you say, well, we're going to sign and trade for somebody else. No, you're not, buddy, because you're over the hard cap line and you can't do that. And that's why all of these things are in place. The pursuit of parity in the NBA and these people, these players moving around and giving smaller market teams the opportunity to have cap space and say, fine, you know what? Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Bradley Beal, you win a couple of championships, but then the team becomes a $200 million team and it's not worth it. Well, sorry, we're going to have to trade you. That's why Oklahoma City has the opportunity to open up cap space and say, hey, look, or if they become free agents and they want to leave and the team says, we can't afford you, bye. Then smaller teams with cap space have a more equal footing because other teams are capped out. They have no mechanism to sign these guys unless they want to pay an insane tax bill. The Warriors can do that because they own their building. They print money. That place is massive. It's huge and all of that stuff. But all of this stuff factors in. So when I talk about Jayson Tatum not making $5.6 extra million, the trickle-down effect is huge. It affects who the Celtics can sign. And if the Celtics can somehow get underneath the tax line again this year, if that's what their goal is, then it pushes off that repeater tax another year. And maybe it helps. You say, why sacrifice time now for these guys? And on the other side of it, you say, well, because if you do trade for Bradley Beal and you didn't pay for the tax this year, maybe you can stay under the tax. I mean, I'm assuming, whatever, never mind. There are flaws in what I'm saying. If you trade for Bradley Beal, you're going to get into the tax a little sooner. But my point is, if you can stay under the tax and then trade for Bradley Beal next year or something like that, or bring him in somehow, then that's why you avoid the luxury tax, because you push the repeater off another year and just makes it a little more palatable for the ownership group, especially in Boston when they don't own a building and they have different limitations. They don't own their regional network. They don't have the same streams of revenue coming in. It makes it just that a little bit more likely that they can hold on to a good team, a championship level team, for another year.